While you are watching this film, Western oil is flowing to eastern Canada, all the way by pipeline. Here you'll see how this transportation system began as a combination of pipeline and tanker to deliver oil nearly 2,000 miles to its first market outside the prairies. This is the record of an historic Canadian achievement. Enterprise and ingenuity spanned half a continent with a west-east supply line that was a milestone in the nation's progress. Natural wealth. The story of Canada is the story of resources, search, discovery, development. And the newest resource is oil. With the opening in 1947 of the Leduc field and the discoveries which followed, Canada became an important oil-producing country, and at the very time when her need for oil was greater than ever before, for Canada was using more and more oil every day. Here are the oil production figures. In 1947, Canada produced about 21 gallons of oil per person. Then came Leduc. 5 years later, annual production was nearly 155 gallons per person, 7 times as great, and continuing exploration and drilling promised an even greater supply. Soon after Leduc, the oil men had come face to face with a tough problem. Here was the oil. More than enough oil for prairie needs. Enough to serve the large market further east, where it could compete with imported crude if transport costs were low enough. The oil men's answer was a pipeline spanning half the continent to carry the crude from oil field to lakehead, and a fleet of tankers to move the crude another 700 miles down the lakes. To build this pipeline, the Interprovincial Pipeline Company was organized. Reconnaissance flights over the western plains showed up many of the difficulties the line builders would meet. The engineers would have to choose the shortest and easiest route. Aerial photographs were taken from Alberta to the lakehead. On the photographic patchwork could be seen the rivers, lakes, hills, highways, even the farmhouses and barns. Working from the mosaics, the engineers mapped the shortest practical line to the Great Lakes. From the oil fields near Edmonton, Alberta, to Superior, Wisconsin, oil would flow underground 1,129 miles. Landmen interviewed more than 2,500 individual landowners and got permission from each owner to lay the pipe across his land. By winter, work on the line was started. Survey parties staked out the route for the pipe-laying crews to follow. Then came men and machines, clearing the right-of-way. At the same time, huge storage tanks were built at Edmonton, the focal point of the oil-producing area. steel pipe was delivered at railway points along the route. Special pipe-carrying trucks strung the heavy sections along the right-of-way. Rivers are major obstacles for pipeliners. Racing against time to complete the job before the spring breakup, the pipeliners started across the North Saskatchewan. Beds of burning coal melted the frozen ground where the approach to the river was dug. Workmen cut a narrow channel through the ice so a trench could be dug in the river bottom. On the river bank, side boom tractors moved the lengths of pipe into position for welding. In wintry weather, welding and covering of the pipe went on. Before the ice went out, the crossing was finished. With the snow gone, construction crews moved into high gear, determined to complete the line before another winter set in. More and more heavy steel pipe moved across the plains. Rotary ditching machines dug a trench 5 feet deep. Trench and pipe, for more than 1,000 miles. Across Alberta, Saskatchewan, into Manitoba, and on towards the Great Lakes port of Superior. Powerful machines bent the pipe to fit on even ground. Then the welding crews moved in. Specially trained pipe welders made the joints as strong as the steel pipe itself. Inspectors checked every weld. Huge machines prepared the pipe for burying. The first machine cleaned and painted it. The second wound on a protective wrapping of glass fiber, asbestos felt, and tar. The pipe was lowered into the trench and the earth scooped back. Cleanup crews leveled the ground and replaced farm and roadside fences. Posts were painted to guide the air patrols inspecting the line. The soil was cleared of rocks and disked, ready for the farmer to use again. River after river was crossed. The Qu'Appelle, the Red River, the upper Mississippi, but the South Saskatchewan was the widest of them all. Out in the stream, a dredge trenched the river bottom. On the river bank, the pipe was welded into long lengths. Protective slats were strapped over the pipe, and concrete weights were bolted in place to anchor the pipe to the river bottom. Sealed lengths of pipe were used as pontoons to keep the line afloat while it was pulled into position. The long line of side boom tractors stood ready to push the floating pipe across the river. On the far shore, a heavy tractor started to pull. The crossing of the broad South Saskatchewan was complete. At the lakehead port of Superior, tanks were built to receive the oil and store it during the closed season of navigation. Each tank would hold more than 5 million gallons. Shipyards at Port Arthur and Collingwood were building the Imperial Redwater and the Imperial Leduc, the world's largest inland tankers. These ships would move the oil from the lakehead to Sarnia and other refining centers. Through the late summer and early fall, pumps at the Redwater field pushed the oil to the great storage tanks at Edmonton, building up a reserve ready to move down the new transportation system to the east. At a ceremony in Edmonton on October 4th, 1950, Premier Manning of Alberta opened a valve and the oil started east. An underground journey to the Great Lakes that would take 26 days. Night and day, pumping stations pushed the oil through the line. Just to fill the line took 63 million gallons. 6 stations, roughly 200 miles apart, maintained the steady flow across the plains. More and more oil moving east to reduce Canada's need for imported oil. At Sarnia, on the St. Clair River, the Imperial Leduc completed her maiden voyage. 620 feet long, on each eastward voyage she carried more than 4 million gallons of Alberta crude. The giant ship warped alongside the new dock that had to be built to accommodate a vessel of her size. Crowds gathered to give her a warm welcome. She was the first of several huge tankers built to move the oil from the lakehead to refineries on the lower lakes. Couplings were connected for the last stage of the eastward journey of Alberta oil. When the western crude arrived, Premier Frost of Ontario spoke of Canada's growing self-sufficiency in oil. From Leduc to the pipeline's completion was only 4 years. In that short time, the new resource had brought sweeping savings to the prairies and to the country as a whole, savings of hundreds of millions of U.S. dollars, no longer spent on imported crude. Oil is the lifeblood of modern industry. Oil makes a country strong. Up from the western oil fields, eastwards across the plains, and on down the Great Lakes, moved Canada's oil to fill Canadian needs.